Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. I have a penchant for very strange things. And so, bored and peckish one day, I invented intelligent jelly. How much more fun I thought it could be if one could make conversation with your dessert before the inevitable conclusion. Discovering my aims, however, the jelly displayed no intention of allowing itself to be polished off with some ice cream and slapped off the worktop and seeped into the void behind my cooker's dials in an attempt to switch the gas on and get me first. Before it could do so, however, I hoovered it up and elected to take up synthesis instead. My penchant for weird didn't have to get flushed down the toilet like the jelly, however, for Signal Sounds has an array of things far weirder than sentient gelatinous pudding. This is not rocket science brought out a sequel to their hands-on peculiar algorithmic sequencer named after a day in the week next Tuesday. Bifacco have an effects module that uses Game Boy cartridges, and a company literally called Rabid Elephant have a Portal drum module which has been restocked after a 4-year absence. The only thing weirder than that will have been the reactions of the customs officer clearing a package labelled Rabid Elephant to a small shop in Glasgow. No wonder it took 4 years. Oh look. They also sell gear from a company called Intellijel. That reminds me of something, all right. Come to think of it, the toilet has been acting up this afternoon. Oh, God! It's coming back up the pipes! So, to indulge your penchant for weird equipment without endangering your life, visit signalsounds.com. That's signalsounds.com. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by Thonk. .co.uk. Hey, you. Who? Me? Yeah, you. Do you like weird, freaky boxes? You like to turn dials and savor the insanity that spews forth, riding a magical carpet made of waveforms into an infinite hall of mirrors of music? Yeah, that's what I like to do on an evening. Oh. Well, did you know that Thonk do DIY desktop products too, right, huh? Yeah. I watched the new Mylar Melodies video where he jams the dangly bits off that Crumb Drum and Freak FM, and I know it's not just modules at Thonk, no, it's desktop stuff too. Oh, well, did you know until December the 7th, 2023, they're doing 10% off those two fine things, the Crumb Drum and the Freak FM? Oh, I did not know that. But do I need to solder? No, sir. You do not need to solder. They are available as standalone products also. But I do recommend learning to solder. Just make sure you pick it up from the correct end, pal. Otherwise you won't be able to unlock your phone anymore. So, to get 10% off the Crumb Drum and Freak FM until December the 7th, 2023, visit thonk.co.uk. Thonk. It's not just modular stuff. Why? Hey, you. Oh, me? Yes, you. I hope you are well. Welcome to my bloody studio. After a very, very arduous period of my life, whereupon I did not have a dedicated room and was attempting to make videos and podcasts in the corner of my living room with my young family around me, a small 8-month baby and a 4-year-old child knocking at the door, howling with sadness, attempting to come in and watch Bing and Thomas the Tank Engine while I'm trying to work. That period was difficult, it would be fair to say, to work. And I have built a purpose-built studio in my garden, and it's inhabitable as of a week ago, and I'm habiting it right now. It's really, really good. Today, we are going to present a conversation with Daniel Vantine of Intellijel. Yes, for the modularly inclined amongst you, Intellijel is one of the old guard of Eurorack. They began around 2009 when Daniel Vantine created the Microstep, a module that I bought. They make really important, brilliant modules, and they do so with a quality level, like a kind of, it's just a really good precision to Intellijel modules, for want of a better term. They do their jobs really well. They are really well considered. And they've had some like certifiable bangers, a number of certifiable bangers, in fact, from the Cyclebox, Shapeshifter, Atlantis, Metropolis, and now latterly Cascadia, a standalone high-end synthesizer. And in this conversation with Daniel, we get into it. We talk about the inception of these things. Why does Cascadia cost what it costs? And we talk about the magic of like the 101 filter, how we got started, and just generally chew the fat. Intellijel have been around for a long time, and I'm really glad that they're still here. They're one of the old guard. And so it's a chance to talk to someone who's been around the block and is still doing it on a daily basis. Interesting to get his perspective. And so I will remind you shamelessly to please consider sponsoring on Patreon if you're enjoying this podcast. That is how we fund this little shenanigans, as well as the two very weird ads, of course. But yes, please consider sponsoring on Patreon. I'm going to hand over now to Daniel, and then I will return post Daniel. Much love to you. And here is Daniel Vantine of Intellijel. Thanks.
My parents weren't, I wouldn't consider them really deep music lovers, but they had a pretty decent collection of records. And so they had Kraftwerk and Popcorn. You know that song, of course.
Yeah.
And Mike Oldfield and stuff like that in there. And I remember liking that from really early age. That was the earliest moments. And then when I was about 13, I really wanted to get in, I was starting to get into more proper electronic music, if you want to call it that. You know, I'd listened to The Cure and Depeche Mode and all the synth pop stuff, but I was wanted to listen to Aphex Twin, and there was trying to learn more about what was happening in the underground music scene. The Orb was a huge one for me early on too. And for the younger kids out there, they don't realize how spoiled that they are now, that there's so many resources if you want to learn about things, right? You can just like unlimited. But in that time, you had to have a friend's older brother or sister who could make you a mixtape, or listen to the right college radio, a pirate radio station at the right time, and try to like write down what you heard if they ever mentioned a track name. There weren't websites you could go to get this information. I grew up in Toronto, and so which was a pretty active city in not just electronic music, but many genres, like especially hip hop, reggae, and dancehall, and he had a huge drum and bass scene early on too. So if you went downtown, there was really decent record shops, and you were sure to be able to get recommendations there. And there's people who were really good at, they call them the tastemakers of the city, that were on the cutting edge of like bringing in all the right music and the right DJs and stuff, and sort of seeding the city, which is kind of cool. We listened to the radio as much as we could, especially college stations, and Toronto had 3 or 4 different decent stations. So at any time of the day, you could usually find something interesting, but most of the good stuff is usually at night. And I was really into electronic music, but also super into punk. And first it was thrash, and then death metal, and that stuff was all starting to happen around that time too, like Napalm Death. And then you learn that those they all had connections to, like, there's a connection between Napalm Death and Surgeon. And
what's the connection?
The drummer from Napalm Death, he has a dark trip hop alter ego called Scorn, and his early equipment he lent it to Surgeon, and that's how he made his first EPs. It was just like that Korg. I forgot the name of the synth. The really simple Korg and a 909 and a mixer and stuff. It was really basic.
Why did you even have any kind of like leaning towards electronic music? You know, when you're a kid and those sounds are just so novel, like they're so weird, they're just ear catching. Do you think that just carried on? Or do you think there's something else that, I don't know what it would be, but something that was pushing you more electronic?
For me personally, when I saw somebody who was, say, a classical violinist or a master of any one instrument, I couldn't imagine doing that. That I would have felt so limited with that range of timbres. But from their perspective, they would have just seen infinite possibilities, and they were interested in other dimensions that were less interesting to me personally, like the intricacies of like pure music, pure, and music theory and stuff like that. It boggled my mind that people, when they had learned what synths could do and electronic effects, why they wouldn't have gone to that. Like even when there was that bridge between electronic and acoustic, like an electric guitar, which is a incredible instrument in a way, that the range of what you can do on a acoustic versus electric, like to me, it's like no contest. But obviously for some people that they don't see it that same way, and they could deeply love one without having any interest in the other. So it's just personal taste. But then there's just the combination of other interests, right? Like I've always been attracted to electronics, mechanics, anything like engineering stuff, and the subculture too. So it was not just the music, but it was the characters, logos, and the album art, and the way people were dressing, and all of that stuff. Everybody grows up and they see somebody that they think is like, oh, these look like people I'd love to hang out with and be like, and others that you just doesn't gel with you. So
I saw someone saying that Aphex, part of what made him successful, and was the time and the place, but also his iconography and the A, and like that, having like a clear iconography combined with his sort of mysticism and lies, that he told in interviews, made him intriguing. So I think and launched that part of, launched his early career.
I've said this in interviews before, and it still resonates with me. The fake, I call it fake because I don't know how much of it is true, but the image, the idea of somebody like the Aphex Twin specifically being able to create his own gear, and that would somehow give him almost like special powers, right? Like that you've created, that also that you're so into the music that you are making the tools for it too. It's like if you were, again, a guitar player or something, but you wanted to know every aspect of that craft, so you studied to become was it a luthier? The term?
Yeah.
Just because you wanted to understand it better. And that really appealed to me. And so early on, I decided I wanted to study electronics and get to a point where I could make this stuff myself. Not with the motivation of starting a business, but just so I would understand it better, and really for that satisfaction of feeling like I've made my own tools. And so there was a long arc to get there, and there's other things that I've learned recently come into play too. Like I definitely have ADHD, and it's something that I struggle with. It really has defined so many aspects of my life. And one of the areas of work that are best suited for people with ADHD is being an entrepreneur, because you're doing a lot of different things, so you're never bored, and it's a really great place to harness like a lot of energy that you might have, especially when you get locked into hyper focusing on different tasks and stuff. And so the combination of loving electronic music, having a natural affinity for engineering and design too, I would say, and then having personality type that was not going to do well working for a company, it just ended up that this sort of this became the way.
When did you first make something? What was the first thing you built?
This will sound super nerdy, but I made circuits when I was at least 12. In Canada, they had something called the Canada-wide Science Fair, and me and this other guy, we had worked on this project to basically make a robot controller and things. I like building projects, and that was a pretty serious project, and I spent months soldering and working on this thing. It
it
never
worked?
quite worked properly, but
Oh, it never worked.
no, kind of, yeah. It had problems, but it worked in theory. We did reasonably well in the contest we were in, and it allowed us to get some money, and I used some of that money to buy some music gear. But I also used to be competitive sailor, and that's a really mechanical sport. So you have to make and fix things all the time for that. There's a lot of the people I used to sail with got into mechanical or material engineering afterwards. My dad is a maker. He likes to build stuff, and my mom, she's a calligrapher. And so we had an art studio at home, and we had wood shop. We had a room for photography. Wasn't a big house or anything, but we just had all the stuff and places to make stuff. So it was just part of our family culture.
It's amazing. So hang on, you said you had some equipment. So did you? What point did you begin getting things? So what was your
gear? So that money was for an electric guitar. I wanted a synthesizer way before then, and a friend of mine, he had early, not the SK1, but similar, like some predecessor to some Casio, and that thing was amazing. Another friend got the SK1. I wanted that so badly, but no one got it for me for Christmas. I suffered his suffering childhood. But that would have been incredible if I got it. I never really got that much synth gear. I didn't know anybody who had it, and I'd seen it around. And that was really, honestly, a big motivation. Like in high school, they had a Korg M1 that could kind of play with sometimes, but you weren't allowed to. They're usually protective of music gear. I was a huge fan of future music, so I used to get that magazine, and then I could listen to the CD samples. And I remember one thing that used to really bother me was I was so curious what a sampler was. It seems obvious now to us, but it didn't make any sense to me because it seemed like it was a computer with a sound card, and I didn't understand why you wouldn't just use a computer and a sound card. And it's not until later you realize, like, oh, well, that is what it was, but it was just like a dedicated hardware and didn't have latency problems. And then obviously the other special things I didn't understand at the time, with the filters and stuff. But I kind of wish I had understood it better, because if I had saved up and got an MPC from a pawn shop or something in the late 90s, that would have been a really cool first tool.
Yeah, it would. Hindsight is 2020. I mean, at the same period in the late 90s, when I was reading future music, I got my first gear, and I just bought all of the current generation of stuff. Like,
oh, nice. Yeah.
Which was good. Like, I had an A4000 sampler and an RM1X, but at the same year, I could have bought a Jupiter 8 for less than the cost of the A4000. You know, the A4000 was £800. Jupiter 8 would have been 600.
I remember seeing that in future music. Yeah. And at that point, I would have made the same decision as you. That there's like, that was another thing. I didn't understand vinyl, and I didn't understand, I thought analog was pretty neat, but like, obviously whatever's new and digital is better.
Yeah.
and even better than that was when it was virtual and software. Like, that was just turning hardware into garbage. So there's definitely a point after high school where a lot of things changed once I tried got to try different hardware. And the more you experiment with these tools you think are great, you start to learn their limitations. And
so you played with the M1, but what was that the first synth that you messed with officially?
Other than like the Casios and SK1s and stuff like that. Yeah, I would say so. We had a really cheap keyboard at home too. It was this like $200 Yamaha synth, and it had a weird FM section on it with these sliders. And so I actually played with it recently when I was visiting my parents over the summer, and you can just make gnarly.
Wow.
It's not a good synth, but I did use that to record.
They do have like 2-op FM. Like some of them are half decent. I mean, yeah. If you're giving it to a child, like, it's still pretty gnarly to give them like a 2-op FM synth, I think, in any way, shape, or form.
Totally. And now like I have 2 sons, and my youngest one had I gave him the monotone, or what is it called?
Monotone.
The delay.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like $60, and he loved that thing, but it sounds really cool. And then if you get that cheap synth and put it through, like, I was playing with that a lot. I was playing with my kids, but really I was playing synths.
And legit jamming.
Yeah.
So then what was your first purchase of like a piece of electronic music gear, not a guitar?
Ooh, that's crazy. You'd think I would stick out as like something.
There were
like,
so many.
Because not because so much was later. Like everything was focused around the computer because I just figured I wasn't gonna be able to afford all this other gear. Like definitely through university, and so it was like the first serious thing would be like Tannoy monitors or something. Like you just once you have sound and you know that you need to be able to hear it.
So this has got to be like 99, 2000, 2001 sort of time.
97-ish, I would say. And then
early,
98, 99 is when I got turntables. Maybe the first thing I ever got was this French company made this MIDI controller. I'm terrible with names. I'm really sorry. And that to me was going to open up things because then I could map this to all the things that were happening in VSTs and try and plan a live performance and stuff based off of that. And I remember I broke and I had to take it apart and fix it and stuff. But I borrowed a lot of equipment from people. And I also tried to make things out of non-equipment. Like our school had old tape decks around, like reel-to-reel ones, little ones. And so I tried the Frippertronic system on that. I used to love getting people's guitar pedals and chaining them together. The computer became like the first time I was able to multi-track, that was a huge deal. I was also real big fan of you remember Rebirth?
Oh yeah.
That software I thought that was really incredible. That was fun to jam on. And then they had sort of mods for it so you could start to put your own samples in. And as soon as I got my first job, my paychecks were almost immediately garnished towards paying for gear. I got a Novation Supernova. That was like my first poly.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't like that synth. I didn't love it. I was still buying based on tech, like specs. And so on paper, that seemed like, and it's taken a long time to really appreciate how a one oscillator synth that sounds beautiful is way more powerful than a 16 oscillator with 20, blah, blah, blah,
all the menus and the little beeps that it makes. Like, it's funny you say that. I mean, we obviously got into this at a similar sort of time. And so my first synth was a Novation Nova, which was the smaller baby brother of that. And exactly as you found, like, well, for me personally, it was just too much. Like, I didn't understand it. It was way too complicated. And it, you think if your first synth could be a 101, well, then you'd be fine. And now it's good. People can just buy 101s in their shop, quote unquote.
Yeah. And that's also like where it's like, if you could have got one thing, an MPC sampler would have made a universe. And you get the synth, but you need a way to sequence it. You need some effects. Then if you're doing external, you have a mixer, how are you recording? There is quite a lot of overhead, but with the MPC, it could have been everything.
You're right.
And there's something that's happened in the last 10, 20 years. I personally felt a really huge shift in music. And somebody the other day, actually, I don't know if you've ever seen this YouTuber. His name is Gayu Beats. He's
he does the recreations.
Yeah, it's great, and it's for old guys like us. He's doing all the classics from the 90s and stuff. But he had a comment about how it seems like because of copyright and all this really aggressive litigation that's happening now, people are not touching samples, and so much of the best music in retrospect was based off of samples, including the people that I thought of as purely electronic that were synthesizing everything. And the deeper you dig, there's sampling is a massive component of this. Yeah. And he had a really great point is that people have stopped using samples, but the reality now is that we aren't getting money from tracks. So the worst that can happen is that they could say you can't sell it, or you're not going to make any royalties from this. But if you're not making any royalties anyways, I think you should just go nuts with the sampling and just enjoy making the best tracks you can. Because in the end, like you're going to get the money from getting to perform, and maybe if people pay to remix. I don't even know these days how people are making money, but definitely performance is a huge factor. So it would be, especially in hip hop and house and really every genre. It would be incredible.
Daft Punk being a great example of this, where it's just like, it's insane the level to which that music is sampled. But then it's, they bring to it the DJ craft of effectively it's like beat juggling records. But you're right. I mean, some of the music is just absolutely incredible. It goes way, it's heard by far more people than the originals were. And I'm sure that Daft Punk give most of their money away or gave. But then what they made from those tours, headlining as they did. I mean, wow. So hang on. So you couldn't afford the gear. You had the computer. I mean, that is similar to what I did as well. And I had some gear, and then the computer was just intoxicating. It was more about the fact that it could just do so much. And it's that class, this trajectory that we all know, if we're older enough to remember that computers were amazing until they were boring again. And did that happen to you? Did you flip my computer, I'm bored of this moment? Or did you?
100%. I did an exchange in Sweden for a year on my third year of university, and they had this incredible show called P3 Dance. It was like the BBC radio of Sweden. And they had so many guests on there, including like interviews with Autekra, Aphex Twin, and then obviously like a bunch of and then there's like Detroit, like Juan Atkins was on there, but they had the people doing the cutting edge stuff in Swedish techno at the time too, like Kari Lekabush and Thomas Krome. And there was one particular performance by Kari Lekabush that was a DJ set, and I thought it was live because of just how much he was manipulating everything. And it sounded so alive and dynamic and always teetering on the edge of going into chaos, a little bit like Jeff Mills too. And that really showed me how, like, first of all, you could perform with vinyl and bring elements of turntablism into that too. But then also I started to feel more about wanting to make music that was performed like that, like jammed out, instead of less just like clicking and moving stuff around on a grid, and just getting more tactile. And then it seemed like a lot of the artists that I liked the most were producing music that way, like that late 90s warp stuff, like Two Lone Swordsmen and Played, and just tons. Like that was an incredible period of time. So much play, jamming out, recording sections and layering things up. And but it was definitely getting these guys knew their machines inside and out. They're trying to get the most out of them. And then we went into this phase of laptops. So the laptops and better software really opened so many opportunities for people. I didn't enjoy going to shows and seeing a guy hunched over clicking on a computer. And despite the fact that MIDI controllers and things existed that could allow you to do something dynamic with it, they were choosing a really obtuse interface, and it didn't look like there was a lot of cause and effect. And there might have been. Sometimes people are doing really, really intricate things down there. But after university, I moved to Victoria, and so I was there for 2 years. One of the people I met there was Matthew Johnson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work.
I am indeed.
And so he's become obviously quite famous, maybe other than Richie Houghton, the most famous electronic musician from Canada, at least from a performance point of view.
Other than Boards of Canada, of course.
Yeah, they're honorary Canadians. But he was all about live jamming. He had an Alan Heath mixer that came from a strip club. I remember I thought that was really funny. He got a good deal on it from the local strip club, and he just learned to work that stuff. He was carrying that spirit of like putting it together in a way that you could play and that you could feel that someone was playing it, and that was important. There's
a really good set of videos. You just see him in his studio, which, I mean, he has like everything in a big corridor with like the mixing desk at the end, and then I think he's using Ableton Live as his kind of primary sequencer, but he has everything's very immediate and off the cuff, and he's using the built-in sequencers on all the drum machines, obviously. He's not using necessarily a master sequencer, and so it's all about just get everything going, get all the loops happening, and then jam it on the mixer. And I've seen him play live, and he's a big proponent of the 101. Like, that's his his sort of workhorse. I mean, for you, is that your sort of holy synth as well, would you say? I mean, given Atlantis, obviously, because you must have got one of those at some point.
Yep, I got one. And as soon as I played with it, it was so satisfying. Like when you think of an analog synth and how, like when you imagine why people would love analog synths, like this, to me, this sizzle or this unquantifiable organic element to it. As soon as you open the filter on that, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. This is good. And it's such a simple architecture, but it's not really simple. It's really, really well curated set of controls to allow, they're not trying to do everything, trying to do some things well. And I don't know how much of this was on purpose or it just worked out that way, but it's a pretty incredible sounding instrument and tool. And then it was also super cool to discover how many tracks that I didn't realize were 101 have turned out to be. And then you're just like, oh yeah, this Boards of Canada, Aphex Twin, Orb, like all these guys were using that. Yeah. Did you ever have a 101?
No. My first synth experience was an MC303, which is two times better. No, it's not. No, and I've got the DynSync kit to make one. So in this room, I will at some point I'll get the extractor fan and build my own. But I mean, no, the closest thing to a 101 I have is a thing called an Intellijel Atlantis, which is this really great module. Which is, and if you like Warp Records from the late 90s, then you like the 101 because you've heard it. You know that sound. It's like a 303, but it's not. It's the most deeply immediate, gorgeous sounding synth. You can't fail to make something that sounds good on it. My other favorite is the Juno 60, and they're not so dissimilar in architecturally. And the Juno 60 is almost like a polyphonic. Well, it's not. I mean, it isn't. It's not. They're all these subtle cork sniffer distant differences, but like there's something about just that filter. I mean, I don't know if you can. How do you typify the Roland filter? And what is the sort of magic that's in it?
I'd have to check on the Juno 60 what filter, if that's because they were using a chip that was basically
it's the 3109. I think it.
Okay.
I think it is the same as the one. I believe it is, and there's a web page that you can see all the the differences. But then I think they come to sound different through gain staging and through the oscillator section being different. I mean, what do you think it is?
So you've obviously tried Cascadia and Atlantis, and they sound different. But you can make one sound like the other, but you have to dial things in a certain way, and that's what's interesting about the 101 and Atlantis is that they've limited some things so that it always sounds that way. Specifically, the way that you sum the mixer section and the level that feeds into the filter is super important because that sets the relative signal to the resonance. And so we've been doing some experiments lately, and that's turns out to be really important for one of the dimensions of how you perceive the sound. The amount of distortion that you have later too, and the kind that can have a really pronounced effect. And even envelope shape and envelope depth. Those, a lot of times people will judge a filter, in my opinion, mistakenly by just doing a sweep or just turning the resonance off. It's so important how it is working when it's tracking pitch and when there's some envelope applied and all these other dynamic elements, and seeing how it changes over time with those things really will change the character of the filter quite a lot. And the Atlantis might not sound exactly like a 101, and it was never intended to, but for me personally, it has achieved a similar usefulness that I've played with so much time over the years. I kind of know what it can do, and when I think of a sound I want to make with it that I know it's capable of, I can pretty quickly dial that in, and it usually sits really well in a mix. Yeah.
I remember when I was testing the Cascadia and you were talking about this, because I was like, it doesn't sound like an Atlantis, that whole thing. Yeah. But so can you, just so I understand, explain that again about the level that goes into a filter, how that affects resonance? Because this may well be useful if you're, designing modular patches. What aspect of gain staging should we be mindful of, and what are the effects if you go in too low or too hard?
So one thing right off the bat, we were actually talking about this morning at work, is like the Eurorack levels are kind of weird because everything's powered with 12 volts, and the nominal signal level, so like the normal level for an oscillator is a 5-volt peak. So that's your normal signal level is already half of the available headroom that you have before it starts to distort. Like, so you can only double it in volume, and then after that, it can't go any higher. It's just gonna distort on whatever op amp you have. And if you have a filter that's oscillating, let's say you have nothing in, and you've turned resonance all the way up, and you've creating a sine wave, that's probably, at least in the filters we've made on Cascadia, Dr. Octature, Polaris, all that, it's going to be 5-volt peak as well. So like a full signal level. Then that means if you're now mixing your oscillator in with that, if they are adding up, then you're already at the maximum. Because like resonances can be a little unstable in what's happening. If your signal is really hot, it could kill resonance. And so some of the nicest sounds to me are when there's this interplay of you have a signal that's just the right level so that resonance is just going to oscillation, and then the signal is pushing it in and out of oscillation. So you're getting these like almost two different notes happening. And sometimes to make that happen, you have to back off your input level because you want to leave enough headroom so that this isn't one signal dominating the other. And since you can't turn up the level of resonance beyond something, that means you have to control the mixer signal going in. And then if your mixer has different waveforms like you do on a 101 or whatever, or the Cascadia and Atlantis, if you don't have any kind of limiting on there, then as you add each waveform and you're changing this balance, the signal is getting louder
bigger and bigger. Louder. It doesn't like average them out on like a 101. It like just adds them.
The 101 doesn't average them out, but they have a specific phase. And I actually measured this. The sub doesn't go to 100%. It goes to about 50%. So the sub is never allowed to go to max level. The phase of the saw, it's actually ramp and the pulse, those add up so that they're ramp pulse so that they're not getting constructive interference too. So they just can't really go that big, but they can sum up. On Atlantis, we have soft clipping so that we always keep it a certain level. And on Cascadia, we have another form of soft clipping that's asymmetric. It's adding some more harmonics. It's got a special circuit. So that there's some character differences between the two. One major difference is the Cascadia has an input level. Instead of hardwiring it and fixing that level, you can change it. But then if you don't understand this, you could end up just be like, oh, I should just turn this up to max, and then you're not going to get the same experience as leaving it in the middle.
I mean, I thought that I understood gain staging from like messing with modulars. Like they do tend to, you learn quite quickly that you've got to gain stage well. And it's only really in later years that I've come to sort of realize that gain staging, you know, within synths is what's causing a lot of what people perceive as character. You know, if you look at like Moog synths with CP3 mixers and stuff, that the internal drives, I noticed it on the ARP 2600. Like on the ARP 2600, when you crank all three, you know, whatever it is, the default mixer levels up, it creates this wonderful, driven, warm thing. And I tried a famous plug-in version of the ARP 2600, having spent ages with the like mini version. And I just was like, I'll just turn all the three mixer levels up. And it just blended them perfectly without any, there was none of that crush. And bear in mind, this is a very old plugin now. Not Rebirth era, but not far after Rebirth, I think, probably by 4 or 5 years. So everyone's starting to learn these things, and there's a real like appreciation for these absolute like little nuances. But they're the things that, those are the little details that just make these things enticing to play with, because, you know, on a 101, there's just not that many controls. So just that simple little, you know, whatever it be, a simple little change, that's captivating. That's what we want to hear. So
there's another thing on the 101 that the frequency range of the filter, it only goes to around, it depends on unit to unit, but like 12 kilohertz or something. So
I remember you saying this with Cascadia as well, with like the brightness aspect was a big question. It goes to 12K.
Yeah. That if you're just having a low pass filter and you want it to always be in a range that you can hear, you can kind of limit it like that. But in Eurorack, because we don't know what people are going to use the modules for, and there's usually multi-mode filter, it's more common to have like a full audio range, like from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. But then if you do things like you have resonance and you're going sweeping up, you're going to go beyond where you can hear because it's supersonic, or depending how old you are. And that can again influence the character, so that on the 101, when you go to the top, it's still totally audible. So it just, you can just slam things and you're always going to hear this, the whine and then coming out of the whine. So again, knowing that you should probably limit to your range, that could change how you feel about the filter.
What it speaks to is this aspect. I was going to ask you a question, which is, how do you know what to leave out? Because that sounds like that's what we're talking about here, is designers that have, because presumably, you know, back in 1981, they could have made the filter go higher, and they could have made those choices, but they chose to limit it at a certain point, right? Or did they? And I suppose then the question is, you know, from your side, what have you learned about what to leave out and where to place the edges of a product?
Honestly, I'm still learning and trying to figure it out. And we have to sort of trust our own taste and experience at times. And so that might be great for 4-pole low pass filter, but when you switch to high pass and you can't cut it off enough at the bottom, there's going to be someone somewhere that is annoyed by that. And then do you start to make every mode different and try to account for those things? Do you have switches to change range so that you have the choice to pick full range or not? And it seems like a lot of the classic synths, they just seem to have got that right limitation the first time, and people just lived with it and enjoyed it. And I think the one takeaway I have from this is I think we're going to be a bit more confident in making some of those limitations in the future. We're going to trust our own taste and what we think is a better range, instead of just, I would say this was definitely a character of early Intellijel designs in general. We were thinking way more in terms of much more discrete building blocks and having really wide ranges of stuff and just expecting the user to dial things in. But I've personally been enjoying using modules that have more things combined and some ranges that have been well thought out. It leads to a faster workflow and a bit more fun, to be honest, like less messing around.
I mean, I savor limitations wherever they're presented, you know. I said a billion times that I think that, you know, the LA2A is a perfect example of that. It's just, give me one knob that just controls it all, if that is an option.
Well, so that's the other side. You can't go, if it's so limiting that you don't feel like you can really be creative, or everyone's patches are going to sound the same, then you've definitely gone too far. So that's the challenge, the balance for sure.
What do you, of other people's gear, which do you admire the most? Is there some examples of things that you wish you designed?
Overall, as a brand and aesthetic and concept, obviously, I thought Mutable was incredible, but that's pretty universally accepted.
Yeah.
I've always loved the brands that weren't trying to copy other people. I don't mean this in a negative way, but there's some brands like I find Make Noise, for example, they would never look at someone's module and be like, I'm going to make that exact same module and just change one thing. I feel like they are always going to be like, if we release something, we have to have our own spin on it. And I really like the companies that think that way. I know from personally, that's a big challenge too, because with so many people making stuff and a lot of similarities between products, to come up with something original is tough. I like the Mannequin's Three Sisters filter. I thought it was a really, really clever design. I was looking recently at the Noise Engineering BIA. That's a really clever design too. I really like that new Rick filter. Reich?
Yeah.
Maybe you know.
RYK. I think it's RYK. I used to call him Rick, but that's not his name at all. His name's Jake, but it's RYK.
Yeah, Jake. Yeah, that filter is a pretty clever implementation. I thought that looked pretty cool. Tons of stuff.
You bring him up. Obviously, he made a thing called the M185 Once, which I think, you know, I'd be interested in both that story and also just your general process for like coming up with ideas and developing modules is interesting.
So that one's a good example because that was a long time ago, maybe even more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, I think it was actually Sean from Analog Haven had said, like, you should look into this sequencer and see if you can do something with this creator. And I was looking for an idea for a sequencer. And once I learned how that one worked, I couldn't think of it. I just got locked in if like, I have to make a sequencer based on this. It's funny because now we have so many sequencer ideas that we could do that would be totally different. But at that time, it just felt like, when you see someone who has a great idea and it just locks you in on that it's, and that goes back to the whole thing of like, I think the best companies are the ones I personally admire the most. They're always able to come up with something new, even when you think it's not possible. Different people had contacted him and tried to work out something, and I managed to convince him. And from that point to actually getting it out was quite a long time. Maybe it was 2 years. I think you saw that one of the first working prototypes at NAMM,
I remember
right?
it well. I remember being in Hawley.
Playing with it.
Yeah, exactly. I remember you were like, I was like, oh my God, it's there. Because I had the same. I can't remember when I first saw the video thing, but I saw that, his little clips that he made. And obviously it turns out he's a film director. And so he's really good at making video clips, but they were made in this very sort of vintage style, but at a non-vintage era, if it was 2006 or 7 or 8, even. But the point was he was like shooting it on like VHS and it was transferred it to YouTube. And he just had such a good riff, like with all this kind of compression and stuff. And it really, you must have seen those, but it cannot be overstated the importance of those video demos, because it was hearing those and just hearing the funk that was built into it. That
I think I only saw one video or something, but yeah.
But I saw that and was just like, oh my God, I really need this. And so then when I learned that you were doing it, that's why I was so excited. And then, I remember being in Hawley and talking to you, and you were like, the prototype's here. I was like, wicked. And I started playing. And then like, you were talking to people for about 45 minutes. And I remember you turned around and you were like, you're still here. Like, you're still here. Go away, weird Englishman. Leave my prototype dripping in your sweat.
That was
alone.
definitely a good sign, yeah.
Well, it really was. And it was. Like, I mean, I made a video of that. The video that I made it because I just felt so strongly that if it didn't succeed, I would be really annoyed. And I was like, I'm going to make this video because I'm going to make you all want this, because you should all want this. And it was true. And
super grateful, because that was a great video, and it got a lot of views, and I'm sure that was instrumental in helping us do well with that module. So thanks for that.
That was great. I think it's the best application of the technology, as it were. That is, a video that can take your passions and it works, and people, and I've had such good feedback. Obviously, for me was like the first video that I'd made in that sort of vein. Minor melodies, whatever that is, that's sort of almost like a personality, a kind of character. Yeah. But it goes beyond that, because I get people who say like, I got into modular because of that demo, and so that's the power of an exciting product, is it can literally be like the wedge that gets you into an entire hobby. And that's also the power of YouTube. Isn't that cool that we can have this? So you can almost have like your internet big brother inspires you in a non-1984 way, but like it gives me hope for the future that these kinds of weird niche hobbies can propagate and will continue to find audiences and will continue to inspire people. In an increasingly segregated and difficult world.
You were asking how we develop now, and it's quite different. We've got, and because of this is like 14 years now, we've had time to refine. So my core team of developers are myself, Wes, who's the lead software designer, Josh, who joined us. He was a master's student, and he did like basically an internship, and then we hired him full time. And he is now our expert in DSP, and the Sea Legs is really his baby.
Seal Eggs
first.
Sounds wonderful as well. What was your brief for this?
Oh, he would be annoyed. I annoyed him with it because we started doing something unrelated to, like, really different. And actually, Sea Legs was originally going to be a small chorus module and something wobbly.
Feature creep.
Maybe more like, what's the Chase Bliss one? Warp Vinyl. There was a little bit of inspiration from that, right? But when in the process of working on this, he's like, oh, check it out if you put this extra delay time on. And we're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe we should make a delay. And I'd always wanted to make a delay, and we wanted to put a lot into it. And let me just grab this, actually. So we had these DSP models, and originally, I don't know if you can see this too well.
Thing. Oh, look.
We had so many parameters mapped out that you could control. It took so long to figure out how to distill this into a smaller set that would fit on a Eurorack module that wasn't like 1,000 HP.
Yeah.
Like emulating tape and BBD, there's not things that you can quantify to say other than you got to make this sound cooler, or I want this darker and fuzzier. And so figuring out this language that doesn't have any scientific basis and communicating that to somebody who has to turn this into actual numbers and algorithms, that was really challenging. And so we would have ideas of how we wanted this to work. It would take several weeks to happen, and then we try, like, oh, actually that doesn't work now. So it took a long time. It took us almost 2 years of doing this. In the process of this, we developed a really big library of DSP code and knowledge about so many things. Like, he read so many scientific papers on how tape machines work and BBD circuits and filters and all sorts of things. And so we have this huge amount of knowledge now that we can apply to keep moving my mic, that we can apply to future things. Yeah.
I see this. And I see this thing called a backpack.
Yeah.
And I can sort of see that, and I can see I was like, oh, that comes out and that goes in other things, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The potential is there. Yeah.
Okay.
Almost everything that's on there were multiple versions of it that existed, like including the reverb algorithms and stuff. Like, and then there's some cross-pollination too. Like, some of the noise parts came from Flurry, and he's funny because I can't remember, I think he's around 30, but his music tastes it's like he's a Gen Xer. Yeah. So I consider him an honorary Gen Xer. And then the fourth person is Igor, and he's had decades of experience in the music industry. He used to work on the Muse
Receptor.
And he worked on that. He's done a ton of work with Dave Smith before, and he's not doing engineering. He's more pure product development, and so between the four of us, we have pretty different personalities, and I'm usually coming up with a lot of ideas, and they're getting immediately rejected by these guys with very good reasons. And all of us have problems with going on tangents, but I'm the worst. And jumping between, and this is the ADHD thing, I jump between way too many projects. We've different systems where, like, we have this Trello board where we have all these different categories and columns and combinations and ideas, and we have our chat system, and it's just littered with diagrams and mock-ups and stuff. Because with limited time and resources, and this last few years has been an absolute roller coaster, we keep having to choose our battles, and some stuff we get really far along with, and we actually put on pause because we decide there's something that makes a lot more sense. You also have to react to what's happening with competitors and changing technologies, and it's.
Well, I was going to say, tell me about this last few years, and especially, like, people from the outside don't understand. I mean, the price of Cascadia is one of those things, I think, where people are like, why does it cost so much? That they simply should have made it half the price and they would sell twice as many. Talk to me about that, and tell me what lay people don't understand about the last few years and the cost of making things, and as well. I think that's a really interesting thing to get your insight on.
So anything you make, at least in our world, you basically have to figure out the cost to build it, and the minimum price you can sell it for is 3 times the cost to build, and ideally 4 times, because that and that seems like such a crude way to come up with a number, because that bare costs then, and the multiplication then has to factor in the labor for processing it, the failures, the tech support, the dealer margin, all the R&D, of course. And in the end, the profit margin is way more narrow than you might think. And then you're taking a gamble on how many of these you're going to sell. When you have custom stuff, there's a minimum quantity that you have to order, or else they simply won't. You can't build it, or it'll be even more prohibitively expensive. And on this particular product, every single circuit, we wanted to make sure that it was performing to an optimal level. We weren't cutting corners anywhere. This goes back to like making sure there's maximum headroom levels, low noise, compatibility with different signal. Like when you start to add up, like each individual switch is $1 or $2. The custom knobs, the custom slider caps. Unless we are making something in the tens of thousands, and we changed the way our circuits work, and we made them less patchable, less capable. That's the only way we could have gotten this cheaper. Yeah.
Can you say how many you make? To help people understand the scale and help people understand what point would you get a bigger break?
We built 500 this first batch, and we had to buy parts for that almost 2 years ahead of time because of the shortages and stuff. And we bought parts for more than that just in case, because if after going through all this and there's still a chip crisis and stuff, you don't want to be in a situation where you put in all this work, because you also need to sell a minimum number just to sort of break even to begin with, and to, especially when it's a new product category, and figure out if you're going to be able to make more things like this. Super steep learning curve, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the idea that people don't really understand that at the very beginning of making a product, you're not just earning money, like you've already spent a fortune, and you paid all everyone's wages more than anything for 2 years on a project. And obviously they're doing other things, but I'm sure it takes a significant amount of time. You just don't pull things they don't come out of bums, they come out of blood, sweat and tears. And so it's sort of, it's interesting. People don't seem to understand.
If we had copied an existing design, because the choices you make in the user interface, the features, that stuff is non-trivial. It takes so much more time than you might expect. It is a massive shortcut to just say, this synth designed in the 80s, they got it right. I'm just going to copy that. I might update the circuit underneath. You have no idea how much time you've saved by doing that. And we really challenged ourselves to try and look at every area of this and see what we could do that makes sense. Plus, it has to fit into this certain footprint, and there's Tetris that you played, and I think we maybe picked too small of a size to try and that was a limitation. So it was really tough to get everything to work there, and then that meant that the circuit itself was really dense. It was a crazy layout. As I said, every little section, there's so many more details behind the circuit than might at first appear. And I think that's a common thing I've heard about Cascadias. At first, you might think you look and just say, oh, it's a subtractive synth. It looks like it has a couple oscillators and a filter and stuff. But as you look closer and closer, there's so many little extras there. And that's what I hope people are
when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God. Like, I was just like, look at this. Because it's like, but what I say to it is credit. And I'm not just saying this because it's you, but I think it's anyone who's actually tried one. It's not ergonomically difficult. It's not too cramped, And I know a lot of folks are like, "Oh, I don't like your stack stuff because it's so little." But it is. But and Cascadia is a small device, but I don't think of it as like cramped. I think I don't know how. I just don't. Like it feels nice to use. It feels like there's enough room for me to get my hands around all of it.
That was 100% on purpose. Like every single control jack, everything was considered. We purposely put this utility strip in the middle and thought about what things would be patched. And reality is like you never have everything patched, so you only have a few things. And is this just a convenient location for bridging from one thing to another? What are the ideal normals? And this was also designed, and, another thing people ask, why didn't you put a sequencer in? It's one of these things of like, you could put a simple sequencer. Even a simplest sequencer possible still takes up quite a bit of space. Everything gets bigger. And then you kind of dominates the way that you use this, that you end up just doing simple sequences and it makes you think of it in a different way. We really wanted this to be a modular in a different, like a studio modular, in the sense it's not a module in a Eurorack, it's a module in your studio. So then you've got effects that you're plugging into it, things that you're processing, things you're sequencing with, and that this could be at the heart of a lot of different things, and hopefully sit maybe by your DAW, and it's where you go to sketch out some ideas or make some sample packs from, or I don't know. Really, we wanted it to be versatile and capable of a lot of different things.
The easel. It definitely is.
Yeah.
It is a bit like an easel in the sense it's also, it wavefolds and it does these things. But it's the idea of this, you can do so much more than an easel can, but it doesn't have the sequencer. But I also think anyone who's not buying a Cascadia because it doesn't have a sequencer, it's just, I just don't get that as an argument. It's just like, you've got things that can sequence this. But yeah. Not everything's for everyone, and I'm sure there are lots of people listening to this who be like, I'm perfectly happy with my Atlantis because I like the simplicity of it. Me too. I'm not going to get rid of my Atlantis, but I'm very happy to have the Cascadia too, and that plus the 2600 and the grandmother is like this kind of. I've got these three devices that each speak to a slightly different character, but they all work interconnected and they add up to this insane modular that, you couldn't, if you bought all the individual modules, it would cost you way more than the individual, the cost of those devices, probably because they're made, well, in the case of grandmother and the 2600, they'll have been made, more of those will have been made than 500,
The feedback has been really, really positive. It's taken us a while to get out this first batch, and this summer has been pretty wild for me on a personal level. Like we ended up moving house. We've been caught up in a whole ton of projects, and then I think you moved recently, like a few years ago, and it's pretty epic undertaking.
I mean, I'm literally only into my studio. Like, you're the first. This is day one of me actually working in this room, and I cannot describe moving. I mean, we know this. Moving house is like one of the most stressful things that you can do, but it is.
Especially when you have kids too, and you're thinking about, there's all sorts of other things. So I'm behind on doing videos for Cascadia. There's a lot of things I'd really like to show that you can do with it, that I haven't seen really people exploring. So I'm pretty excited to get caught up on this. But as I said, everybody who's got one so far has seemed really, really happy with it. And I've seen a lot of comments about people being really impressed with the feel and quality. And that's something, again, you're not going to get if it's made out of cheap components and not built to last. And there's enough stuff going into the landfills. We'd really like to have built something that is substantial, that's going to last you, hopefully, as a useful tool for many years. I think the thing I'm most proud of is, despite how many new companies are coming into Eurorack, all the changes, all the roller coaster of products, or pandemics and products or stuff, that we are pushing ourselves to still try and come up with stuff that is relevant and useful and maybe surprising. And that's because the core people behind Intellijel, we're super, super passionate about this stuff. We live and breathe synths. All our time is spent thinking about them and playing with them and stuff. So in terms of the recent things we put out, obviously Cascadia was a huge milestone for us. Like, that's something I've had a dream since high school, to put out a piece of gear and to know that it's possible that musicians I really admire are going to use this at some point. Like, I feel like what we did with Metropolis, I was really, really happy with how that turned out. That we took a sequencer that was already pretty successful, but had lots of areas that could improve. And I think we've created something. Every time I sit down, I come up with something new with it. It just feels like a really creative tool. And there's so many details that have gone into that. This is definitely the work of a collective of like-minded people to make that happen. Well, just curious, what's your favorite Intellijel product then?
I think it is the Metropolis, perhaps. And I'm going to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. And I say that only due to the simplicity of it. I think for me, like, we've been talking about simplicity, and I guess we've been talking about the 101, and I suppose that speaks to what I mean, is that you go to a 101 and you don't really have to think very much. You just move your hands and wonderful things will come out of it. And that is the case with the Metropolis as well. And I mean, the Metropolis does this too, but obviously the Metropolis then to it adds all of these like deeper bells and whistles. But for me personally, I don't always love, I have the luxury because I've got a lot of gear that I don't need to push this one module, quite, internally, for example, with like the internal modifiers and things like that. Whereas I would almost rather, my favorite pairing with the Metropolis was always the pressure points and brains, because you can just, you can just touch the plates and shift it from one, octave shift or like, shift the sequencing. And that just, everything in front of you, just very simple, but it just leads to great results. And it's, at the moment, all my stuff is in Chaos, but I will put together a kind of Metropolantis, like a sort of a hybrid like Metropolis, or it will be the Metropolis because I've got the Metropolis in my like live system, and just that and Atlantis, or that potentially in a sequencing rack with the Grandmother 2600 and Cascadia. I've been thinking a lot about the ARP 1601, I've got the 2600, and I really want, I just want a way to sequence it, and I want a way that doesn't, I don't change too much, because I think this is the, Eurorack's very mature now, and you see people talking about, getting, I don't know if people say they get bored of it, but I think people are sort of getting, I think jaded is the wrong word, but it's just, I don't know. But what I do know is that I like the idea that things don't change. And I like that's what's powerful about something like the Cascadia, that it's just a thing, and it won't change, and you can't add more modules to it. You can pair it with other things, and you could try different effects in the effects loop, and that will bring out different things, and you can, feed it other modulation from stuff. But the point is, it doesn't change. And I think that there's a kind of endless tail chasing that can happen with Eurorack, especially exacerbated by the fact that you've got to bring out new products and keep pushing things forward. The posh word would be a dichotomy of the fact that, you want to be interested in the latest and greatest, and you want to see what you're missing, but you also, there's a point where you do need to just stop thinking about buying new things. It must be hard for you. You make things and you have to think about what's new. You yourself, I can see you've got a 909 and 808, and what do you feel about this? Do you constantly crave the new, or do you put a lid on this stuff and just play?
So I used to, before the company took off, I worked on tracks every single day. I never really made much of a career out of any of this stuff, but I was super passionate about making music. And that has definitely gone to the wayside as I'm spending more and more time on this stuff. So we have all this gear around, but I find I'm usually using specific things when we're focusing on something new. What is like something a point I wanted to make though is I've noticed that quite a few like seemingly successful musicians, especially in the modular space, they seem to have a really important limitation that they impose on themselves, which is whatever their performance rig is going to be, they try not to change it for, like, I think Richard Devine, he's got this rig. He even has like a module that we made called the Mutagen. I only made like 100 of those 14 years ago, and he still has that because it worked as a mixer and he doesn't need to change it. So he has this, if you've seen his Instagram post, he has everything. Like his studio looks insane, and he's always getting the latest, and he's incredible because anything he gets, software or hardware, he just absorbs it instantly. Like he's a master of that. But his rig for live, he will not change it as far as I know, like more frequently than once a year, because he needs to know exactly how it works and learn to use it. There was a live set that I saw Blawan do on this channel on YouTube. It was for a store or something, and he had a pretty small rig, and the modules weren't even bolted in, and he had a looper and he had an external sequencer and a delay, and that performance impressed me so much because he had such a simple setup, but the looper allowed him to get such so many interesting layers, and using his own hands and as modulation sources and get the complexity and then capture it and keep working. Sometimes if you feel like stuck in a rut or you're bored with the modular, sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes you need to just get that right system together, and then suddenly it all comes together and you realize like, oh, there's this magic. I've found that at times when I'm teaching someone how modular works, and for that first time, and you take oscillator and then you put it into an amp and then a filter and then you turn this, there's always this like look of amazement, like ooh, when you hear it's so different from the experience of sitting at a computer and stuff. A recent change that has made a difference is you can see behind me this. It's only 7U. So many of my videos and tests have always been on a smaller system. I'm just using whatever the latest modules we have, and I'm trying to putting together a slightly bigger system and not worrying about everything being unique, so that you have to have one of everything. So there's like triple oscillators and two flurries, and that makes a huge difference. Like this system right now, I can patch up stuff that's there's a lot more things that you can patch up, and I found it really, really fun to start exploring that. I haven't had a lot of time to play with modular the last few months. And so recently getting back into it, it feels fresh and exciting again. So
what's that mixer you've got? I've seen that mixer before that.
Oh, the ProRack. APB? APB.
Yeah, that's it.
Actually, that was tipped off to me by Matthew Johnson. He has a big one. And there is some connection and heritage in the guts between that and Neve. Some design ideas and stuff, and there's somebody who worked connected or something. Like there's some really serious engineering, and this brand isn't super famous, but I think the last few years I've noticed a few more electronic musicians have been, actually it might have been Aphex Twin had mentioned something about this one too.
I
think it's just started to pop up with like people who know gear. I saw this one. I
saw one at the Sonic Super Booth Tip Top stand. They had one, and it was such dorks. But I was just like, there's all the beautiful Buchla modules, which are amazing. But I was then like, what is that mixer? That looks cool. And then there was someone else that was stood next to it who was just like stroking his beard, staring at it too. And I was like, this mixer's really caught my eye. And it's that one. I don't know why. It's sort of, I think there's something about its kind of Schwayman battle colors, Battleship. Not so dissimilar to the Cascadia, which feels quite Schwayman-like to me, and it's sort of precision and engineering and all of these things. And I know that you use those little red switches are like the Schwayman. They're the same ones.
They're the same.
Yeah,
they're not cheap, but we must have used 100,000 of those, and I think we've had one failure or something like that. So yeah, again, this is what you pay for. In our old modules, we used to have these sliding switches. Those do not last very long in devices. Okay. And a lot of like the push click switches, they might have a lifespan of 10,000 clicks. If you're using these things a lot, you can get through that quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, not those push ones. The plastic ones you might see on a cheap mixer.
Yeah, but for mutes and stuff.
Tax switches usually have a good lifespan. They're designed to last longer. But the APB mixer is known for having really sweet sounding EQ. And then also if you look, this is actually designed for live sound reinforcement, but because of that, it has really flexible routing, which is excellent for electronic musicians. So
literally Googling it right now. Yeah, it does look, I mean, it just looks beautiful. But I mean, I was looking at, because I moved in here and I'm like, oh, cool, I can actually get my Circlone out and my samplers and just actually build my rig. And I was looking at getting a sort of mid-sized mixer and I'm kind of in that holy trifecta of like Midas, Venice, Ghost, 24
Those are good
LE,
too, yeah.
And the Ghost is probably, the Midas Venice is that small, tricked out sort of thing. But then the APB kind of looks like it's in a similar vein, that sort of like compact, precision, interesting, good for techno, because lots of sends and other little tricks.
Like 6 cents or something. Yeah, the Midas Venice is a staple. It's a lot chunkier and it's an older design. This one, they've updated the design and it's all done with modern surface mount and
I know that Matthew Johnson's used the Midas as well. But I mean, the APB is like a current generation, isn't it? You'd have to buy that new. So that then... Whereas, the joy is buying old, really high quality 90s and early noughties mixes that going for a third or a quarter of what they were worth originally.
And having to recap them all.
Yes.
Fix every single part on it. Yeah. You never know. I'm amazed when I see how cheap mixers are sold for sometimes. And you look at just adding up the cost of the knobs alone. Like this mixer is a pretty reasonable price, I think, for considering how much stuff is on it. I don't know how they do that, but yeah.
I guess it's just like economies of scale to this. It's that, we're in a niche within a niche. If electronic music is a niche, compared to guitars and all these other things where, you go into most houses might have a guitar, or 2/3, would you say, or a third of houses might have a guitar in them. Then wonder what percentage
which is really super valid point. And what's crazy to me though now is with guitars, it's like, so my kids are 10 and 13, and there's so little music with guitars on it that they that their friends are listening to. Like this whole generation seem completely uninterested in them. I've personally raised them with a steady diet of lots of 90s music, and so they like a lot of stuff that's older. And we listen to BBC Radio 6 a lot and KEXP, and so there's still things happening. But this is something else I wanted to talk about, which is like, we are so spoiled for choices with equipment right now, in guitars, in DJ equipment, and especially in electronic music equipment, that this should be the time to be making the wildest stuff. It's like I'd use DJing as an example. Like I used to DJ techno, and I would kill to have had setups like Richie Hawtin had, where I could do live looping and remixing on the fly and having all these effects and stuff. And he had to design a special rig to make this happen, and move, and he's continued to do this obviously. But now everyone could do that super easily. But I'm not seeing DJs play around a lot with their equipment to take advantage of all these capabilities. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't keep up with DJs, and I'm not a DJ. My brother is, though, and maybe he has sent me some stuff with, like, for example, people who are like scratching something that comes out as CV, scratching into a modular. And the scratching is creating a control voltage. But I think you're right that those people are extremely rare. Even within the sort of synth world, how many people are really consciously trying to create new forms of music with this gear? I don't know.
I think it's exciting that there's so many more controls available to do really doing crazy breakdowns, really quick to layer more than, like, when you're DJing vinyl, you're always, even if you're trying 3 turntables, or it can be like, I don't know if you ever heard of this DJ Algorithm who used to play on 4 turntables. He was amazing. Jeff Milligan, minimal techno with 4 turntables and amazing performance. It was a lot to keep track of, and then also be thinking about trying to mix and manipulate. And I almost wonder if what's happened is that we've overwhelmed people with choices, and so then it's easier to just sort of stay safe,
Yeah, I mean, I thought of, as you were saying that, I was thinking of Surgeon, and thinking of like there's that boiler room where he's got his big beard and his like shirt, and he's I looked up some of the tunes that he was playing and found like the original versions of them, and it's what he was doing is turning things that were not techno into techno, tunes that just are not meant to be danced to, And he made them danceable, and he did it and was doing it like kind of live in front of an audience, which is wild. For me, that feels like I don't know if the only expression of it, but an amazing expression of what the technology is capable of, is to say that I'm going to play you music that you just cannot hear, we cannot play in this context, but I'm going to make it so it works, and here it is, and you're all going to dance to it. In terms of the role of a DJ to bring you music is like an amazingly broad and open-minded thing to do. Not least, like I've heard some of the sets that he's played. He has a tremendously insightful like knowledge of both. You can really. There's like a great example of his. There's a 6-hour set that he did at Hare and Hounds, and I'll try and link to it if I can find the right one. But basically, I put that on when I was at work, and I just had it on all day. Well, all day for 6 hours of the day, and the arc is just so well considered, and it begins, ambient, and it slowly builds and slowly builds and it slowly builds and it slowly builds, and a 6-hour period. By the end, it is absolutely storming. I'm just like, what craft and like what knowledge to be able to do that. And but I think those things are quite invisible, like to most people. And I think so I'm sure, I am sure, and I hope people will link to examples of this, because I feel like there's got to be people that are doing, not just him, but all manner of other kind of shades of the hype. It sounds like you're speaking to the hybridization of
Richie Hawtin is still doing that, it seems. Anytime I have a chance to see Jeff Mills play, I would go and see it. Like, he's definitely top 3 favorite DJs to watch perform. But his method would be, he's found like a set of skills that he's developed over many years. So it's not technology based so much as just he's like a master at doing things a certain way, and he can always make it
the 909 solo.
And I just love the tension. That was something that was really exciting when it was vinyl too. Just like sometimes things were going off the rails, and then they would be saved, and just this excitement that you're in for a ride. And sometimes it wouldn't work out, but sometimes it'd be amazing. I was wondering if you'd seen any of the store performances.
Yeah,
with Speedy J organizes. Yeah,
I mean they are insane. And in fact I messaged Surgeon about, because there's they recently did the 6-7 hour ones over a 2-day period. Firstly, I'm just like, Speedy J, do you piss? Do you not? Does he have a catheter?
Yeah.
How does that work? He must just, I think he's got baggy trousers and a catheter down there, and he waddles off stage at the end of it. But it's insane. It's insane. But then because I asked Surgeon, I was just like, I'm sure he doesn't mind me. I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but it's not that, I don't think it's a big secret, in the sense that I was like, did you prepare? What did you rehearse? Is there a key? Is there a, so-and-so? And he's like, no, and no, and no. Everyone just rocks up. They bring, this is me reading between the lines, they just rock up, they bring what they want to bring. And obviously there is a master tempo that Speedy J is controlling, because there you can see times where he just slows it all right down and he speeds up. He also is on the kind of master decks so that he can cut things, feel like high pass drops. And he also has a 909 sat in, in a sidecar for just those moments where you're like, something just needs to happen right now. I'll have, bring in some hats and rides, there they are. So he can kind of be a final layer. I asked, I was like, were you queuing things? And he's like, no, he doesn't queue. He just does it all out in the open because it's more fun that way. He says, but other people did, they would use cues. And what occurred to me, I was like, when you listen to the music, it's unbelievable. Every moment sounds like a really brilliantly well thought out and brilliantly produced techno track. But I think it's coming from the fact that everyone's a master at what they do, and they know crowds and audiences, and they know what will translate and what will work, and they just know They know music and they know gear. But they also, you do, when you've got 5 or 6 people, you do have the luxury that you're not on all the time, and you don't have to, it's not just you and no one else, which is the thing that, certainly I found, and any solo artist knows that, it's just you. That's very different to you and 6 other people who are contributing, and, so that half the battle's knowing when not to play and to get out of the way and let them do something, and then come in when you have something to say. I had a jam recently, like a friend of mine, a group of people, and I was struck by at the end of it. I was like, it all just sounded so coherent and good. Like everyone was really good, and he was just like, all good listeners. And that's because it's listening first and foremost that makes you know what to add and know when to speak and know when to be quiet. So,
yeah, those performances look so fun to participate in. Like, I think there's a delicate, you don't want too many people, but you don't want too few. I think that performance I was talking before with Blawan, he had mentioned that like, it's definitely better to have at least 2 people just because it gives you time to exactly what you said, listen, and then think of something to add instead of just going, which there's a lot of pressure. But standing for 6 hours, like I'm with you. I would have a hard time. Like,
I mean, I recently discovered, or didn't discover, but through Store, I discovered, about Ninjam and their like internet jamming, which I'll mention here because the fact of the matter is it's absolutely incredible and needs to be.
I've never heard of it. Okay.
So I think it was originally developed in 2006 from what I was reading the other day, which is bonkers because it's not that well known. But what Ninjam does is it is a client for 2 people or more to jam via the internet in quote unquote real time. And so I did a jam the other day with a friend of mine on my Patreon. I have a patron of mine who wanted to try it. We were talking about it. He's like, let's do it. So the way it works is that I would play and my audio is sent to you in Vancouver, but with a 1 bar delay or a 2 bar delay. And so you hear it and you're hearing it 2 bars after I played it, and you add to it. And 2 bars later, I get what you added to what I played. And this like loop continues where we just are each making our own little tracks. We're hearing them overlaid over each other, but with this sort of, the weird bit is with this like a 2 bar like time shift. But when we're talking about making, chugging techno, it doesn't really make too much difference where things layer over each other. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is that I was in Leeds and he was in San Francisco, and we just, when we got in sync with the plugin, then we were in sync, and we were the band in sync. We were in sync for like, it never drifted. So then it's like you're stood next to each other. When you actually, there is this weird super latency, but you never notice it. It feels like you're absolutely millisecond in time with each other, and it's really wild, and it's free. So if you get, the plugin is called Jamtaba, Jamtaba, and Jamtaba is a Ninjam client that can be loaded into Ableton Live. And Ninjam is generally, that plugin is in Reaper, so you can get Reaper obviously and try it, but I would urge anyone listening to this to get Jamtaba and try and fire it up, and it works. You basically host a server, you give your friend your IP address that the server is on and the port, and they can log in, and then you can have like a Google chat open. It's turned into a bit of an instructional because it's just so important. It works so well that it's upsetting that it's not more popular. And Store did this during COVID. They were using Ninjam to do those remote jams. So Surgeon and Speedy J were jamming together like they were in the same room. And it was interesting. There were people who were like, "There's a this is on tape, there's some weird delay because I can see that he turned the filter and it didn't happen until like 2 bars later. And, they thought he was miming, but it was because of these weird time shifts. But point is, it works. And it should be a way that people, I've met you and I've been to events and met lots of other humans. I have friends who have modulars who live, 5 minutes walk from my house. And so I'm lucky in that respect, but there's so many people who don't know anyone who uses this gear, and it's such a shame because then suddenly the world of them being able to enjoy these same kinds of maybe not the 7-hour jam, but the internet can enable anyone, no matter where they are in the world, to jam with people as if they're in the same room. That's actually what this technology allows, and it just no one knows about it.
Yeah, this is really cool. I'm going to definitely look into that. Wes was really, really hyped about the store performances during COVID, especially that was something that was a real breath of fresh air when we were all cooped up.
So what is the future of music technology then?
You asked me a while ago what I thought about if AI was going to have a play or something like that. And I at the time, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. That was maybe 6 months ago or something, maybe longer. Now I think it's going to change a lot. Okay, so this is something that's really interesting. There used to apparently be this cycle between pop and rock, like alternative rock or rock focused music it was every 12 years that they would kind of shift what was the most popular and dominant. And so like 91 was when the peak of, that's when grunge came to the forefront, and then there was like a bunch of Britpop-y things that were happening after that, and so it was guitar, and then it went blah, blah, blah. Apparently that cycle has been broken after 50 or 60 years. And there's this Canadian podcaster who's talking about it, and his theory is that this last wave has been dominated by live streaming, or not live streaming, by online streaming. And the stream, instead of DJs picking music and promoting things, algorithms are promoting things. And so the algorithms have been fed based on what was popular at the time, and then continue to feed that same vibe. And so we've been locked in a period of time of being promoting a certain type of music, and then it's just kept that going, which is a really interesting thing. If whether that's true or not, it's interesting to think about that, because we are definitely in a new phase. And then some wild stuff has happened where we've really been demonstrated recently the power of AI to create convincing audio and video and pictures from nothing. Or even more worrisome is when they are able to, when they, like people, when it is able to process an artist's work and then recreate almost like identical new work. There's something happening. Wasn't there like a Drake or a Weeknd song or something like that where that was...
I mean, I've now seen like a bunch of these kind of mashups, which are, they sound really good. They sound frighteningly, I mean, they sound horrendous. I mean, but they sound good. Like they sound like what they're meant to sound like. I mean, it's interesting what you say about the, when you say streaming service, you mean like Spotify, and it's the curation, like the algorithmic curation that happens there. I was wondering about that because of, right now, we're recording this at the end of November, and everyone's having their Spotify Wrapped things. And I mean, people are using Spotify for its convenience, but I worry that what will happen on many levels, when Spotify has AI, and so that it will have AI radio that will be completely tuned to your preferences and just spit out infinite novel music, Like, and some of the visual stuff that is happening, like Mid-Journey and what the images that is capable of creating are astonishing. They are astonishing. They are like literally like dreams made real, like, these mashups of things that it can create. And so the idea that when you can just listen to the perfect music, it's like something from a dystopian novel. There is that, like, there's some like old Archie comic where there's like, in the future, oh man, we just push a button and we listen, the music comes out. They're like, oh man, that sucks. And it kind of does suck, because I suppose what's the human, where's the human and all of that? But I don't know. Like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder as well is part of the problem. And will that, you can make a case that at this point, all forms of creativity are just mashing up two old ideas being mashed together. And that can either happen in wetware or it could happen in software. And at the end of the day, a human has to appreciate it. So it's that thing of, if you've got a generative Eurorack sequencer and you just letting it play, it still requires that you yourself choose what to keep and what not. And that makes it your own, because a human has vetted what everyone else hears. But I suppose that isn't always going to happen. But I suppose then the other point is that artists are already not making any money out of music, so they'll make even less. But they'll still make music because they love to, right? Or will they?
A lot of things will be challenged. We'll be challenged on what the human input means, and can we discern human performance and the embracement of the imperfections? At what point can AI mimic even that? I would love to say that that's years away, but I think it's way closer than we were realizing, and so that's obviously going to impact our tools. And
I'd love to have an algorithm and just be like, give me weird, garage rock from 1991, but only the mistakes. I want to hear just mistakes, just like everything out of tune, all the drums at the wrong time, and just see what it comes up with.
So there's they've been doing studies on, because of a lot of the isolation that's been happening, on people having conversations and meetings online versus in person, and doing brain scans and measuring levels of happiness and all this stuff. And they are finding major things missing from people's lives when they have diminished human interaction. And so that can never be replicated by AI. There are things that are happening when people are there's synergy or whatever that is happening when people are together. And so AI is not going to be able to recreate that replace that. And so maybe what's going to happen is that we're going to push people towards reacting to this AI by having more in-person contact with each other for performance. It's not inhuman. And
going to not just online store, but going to the club in the Netherlands and dancing with other people.
Yeah, and some electronic music doesn't need to be alien and cold, as we well know and love. But some tools are more conducive to expressing that than others. And this is where I love analog gear, and I feel like there's something in that. The advantage of analog electronics and electric guitars is that they can be loud over their acoustic counterparts. And so maybe there's still going to be a place, maybe not forever, but there's still going to be something to happen. But so the focus might be to think more about what would benefit an in-person performance and what benefits human interaction with those tools. Personally, that's something I remain interested in, and I think that's, if I'm planning about the next few years, that's something that I'll be trying to keep in mind for sure. And that would definitely influence the kind of devices that we want to make, that if it's going to fit into that model.
Oh, yes. I'll buy that for $1 when it comes. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your time in generously talking to me and for being candid and open with my questions. Obviously, specifically the ones about making the products and what they cost. Like I think about Cascadia, its retail price is 3 to 4 times what it costs to make it. That's quite a thing to divulge, but and maybe surprising. I mean, I was surprised. My brows raised a little. But of course, this the whole point of what I was saying in response was the fact that, when you come to release a product, and as Daniel said, like they bought the parts 2 years ahead, 2 years to have sunk costs in order to make sure that you can produce these things, that all their wages have to be paid, it's a lot. It's very easy to armchair quarterback the price of things and say, well, it's just obviously costs way too much. But what are we comparing it to when we say it's expensive? Are we comparing it to things made by companies that might make 10,000 of something. And I think also particularly there was a sort of sub-conversation, a thing we did not discuss directly, but there is a certain company out there, of course, who would have you believe that you're being ripped off by all these big little companies. Wait, what? Yeah, stick it to the little guy, that whole thing. That, of course, all these tiny little companies with 4 people developing products, they're the ones that are ripping you off. They're the shysters. It's not the, multi-million pound companies. No, not the ones with thousands and thousands of employees. They're not looking to kind of crush people. It's a weird situation, especially when that company, they have a quad VCA version of Intelligel's VCA, which they gave the name of a sexual innuendo, which is cool. And it's a tricky one because, of course, truly, if someone gets into Eurorack because of the fact that they saved £100 on a VCA, then that's great. If it really does actually mean that the £100 they were going to spend on a VCA, that because they've saved £100, then they will get into the whole format because of it. But of course, then also, why do they need that one specific VCA? Like, everyone else seems capable of designing original VCAs. Like, everyone else has done what Make Noise did. What Daniel said when he said that what I like about Make Noise is that they look at what's out there and they try and fill a corner that hasn't quite been done before. They try and find a new spin on it. And that creates innovation. That's the difference between being inspired by the Surge Dual Universal Slope Generator and the Buchla Function Generator, the 281, and for mixers and other bits and bobs, and thinking if I put all these together in a weird original way, I'll get something that's like them, but its own little unique configuration. Versus firing up Photoshop and being filmed in a company video, literally with maths panel in one part of the screen and a version of maths in another. The two processes could not be more illustrative of what drives innovation and what stifles innovation, because it is disincentivizing companies to make products and release them if the risk is that they're incredibly successful and have it taken away from them because other companies realize that they can get away with it. Like, you don't get anything new is the point. Take A and you take B and you create C. But another alternative is you take A and take B and you just make a version of A and B that's a little bit cheaper so that people no longer buy from the company that actually gave you A and B. And all you're left with is the company that gave you a copy of A and B. And that's it. No more new products. I mean, that's an extreme example, but there's an element of truth in that, and it's not cool. It's also not fair to say that you are being ripped off by these companies because you have no idea what goes into their pricing. You don't know. You don't. And that's why I talk to people and I ask them these questions, because they don't talk about it much. It's somehow seen as almost like a negative that companies have to make a profit. Like, they have to make money, not just to make this thing pay the bills, but because if they make a profit and they keep a bit of it and they can bank it, then they can make something you've never heard of tomorrow or next year or in 5 years. They can build towards the next innovative C that we've not seen before. But they can't do that if they're being crushed. So it really bothers me because I speak to these people and I see their passion, I see their originality, and I see their good intent. I hate to see it stolen from them. It sucks. Let's celebrate original, innovative, boutique companies that are still here after all this time and are still inspiring us by making interesting creative products that try and do new things, that try and put a new spin on something, that is to be celebrated. And I doff my cap to Intellijel for having done this for so long, and they're still doing it. So please consider sponsoring on Patreon if you can. Otherwise, I won't be able to do this anymore. So yeah, please consider that if you can. If not, please also consider sharing this episode. Tell your friends if you're enjoying Why We Bleep. Let them know about it. That is an incredibly helpful thing to do, and hopefully shouldn't cost you a penny. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to thonk.co.uk. Thank you to Signal Sounds as ever. Please check them out. And we'll be back very soon. We have more bleeps up my sleeve. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.